Okay, so very good morning to everyone who is here on site and also those tuning in. I think this first through, I think we are the last city to celebrate, So, but it's okay, I always like to hear when different cities are gathering. It is encouraged that even you have a few people or you have a lot of people, it doesn't matter. You want to celebrate first fruit together because that is a time where the Lord will come and begin to do certain impartation. Now, this is a month of Iyar, and Iyar is always about how do we take hold of the revelation. So I know some people, they do struggle with that, and they're like, how do I become prophetic? How do I hear the voice from God? And one of the ways is really to come to the corporate gathering, because Judah just now was just great, and when you are here, you are able to tap into the revelations and then receive what you need for yourself. And then you can begin to do that at home, because you need to be able to do that personally and also corporately. But if you are here and there's a corporate anointing and you can't even worship, then I think for sure when you go back, you are not able to do that, okay? So this is the whole issue of Iyar, and we need to press onto that. So that's why I want to talk about the prophetic edge for kingdom advancement. That's something that the Lord has given everyone, and this is the month, throwing down the gauntlet, and some of you will be like, what is a gauntlet? Okay, I'm going to show you the only picture in the whole slide, okay, later on. Yeah, really. Okay, so we are transitioning into the month of Iyar, and just now so many prophetic words talk about transition, because it is a time for us to move from, Passover to Pentecost, for Israel to move from Egypt to Mount Sinai, okay? And it is a time the Lord is wanting to release a great kingdom manifestation. So it is all happening right now. Remember we talked about tribe alignment last week, and God is arranging the tribe. And He's causing people to make certain decisions. How do we want to walk together? Where do you want to be in this season? And the formations of army on earth is being arranged as well. And that's all happening, and it's good because we are going into the greatest kingdom advancement in history. It's going to happen. It's happening in this generation. We're looking at a 10-year decade. 10 years, people are like, 10 years is such a short time, it's a long time, but I tell you, in a blink of the eye, it will be over. Great clashes of kingdom, it will be fun, but also challenging. Everyone says fun. Warfare can be fun because the reward is great. Every time there is a warfare, you receive the spoils of the world. Now remember, we've been given all the authority on earth, and that's something, unfortunately, the ecclesia always kept forgetting. We have been given the authority, and so we have a duty, we have an obligation, we have a responsibility to step into that reality, okay? So why is first fruit important? Because it is a reminder of this process. There is a process, and God is leading the process, but at the same time, there has to be a willingness on our part. That's why we have to be willing to worship. We have to be willing to give. We have to be willing to just utilize our spirit in such a way that we'll be able to tap into the revelation. Okay, so let's talk about kingdom clashes and what are the things that are happening right now. And really, we have kingdom manifestation. The kingdom of God must manifest because that's what Jesus came to do. And then we have culture clashes, and not just the different culture we talk about on earth, but there is a kingdom culture and also the human culture and the demonic culture. Then we have a lot of what we call woke. Nowadays that's a term you hear. And people are using that word to sort of imply that we are enlightened, we are awakened, but actually it is a false manifestation. It is a humanist kind of setup. And basically they want to say we are more enlightened, but in fact it's humans showing their fists to God and say we are smarter than God. So that's why, unfortunately, the thing that pisses me off the most is when Christians become woke, because they are just walking away from the Word of God. And ultimate goal of the enemy is to create a demonic authoritarian system. This is nothing new. Since in Genesis 6, we already saw that the Nephilim tried to do that. Nimrod tried to do that. Nero tried to do that. So many people try to do that. So this is nothing new, and it's just manifesting in another generation. And then we will begin to see false versus true reformation. So when people say we want to have a reformation, we need to see the fruits. So the church, the ecclesia, has been tasked to usher in, to facilitate, to be agents of true reformation on earth. So that's you and me. We have been tasked to do that. So these are the kingdom clashes, and you have to ask God, what is my role here? What have I been asked to do? Because we all have different assignments and tasks. Okay, so just bear in mind. So let's talk a little bit about first fruit. Now, first fruit worship, that's what we are here for today. And even those who are joining on site, and some of you celebrated a few days ago, it is all about establishing all that God intends for us. God has certain things for us, and this worship will cause that to come. Remember in Genesis 4, in the aftermath of mankind being evicted from the garden, right? They were kicked out, right? After the fall, the first thing happened, you realize the Lord caused Cain and Abel to give first fruit. That was the first thing. Because the whole principle is this: first fruit sanctifies all that we have. After they were kicked out from the garden, they have to begin to work to cultivate. It is not easy to get the fruits from the land. It is not easy to have your own animals, etc. So by giving first fruit, everything we get, no matter what is the source, God will sanctify, and then we can use it for kingdom work. The other thing about first fruit is it has a redeeming quality that cleanses our bloodline. Now this is the excuses you hear most of the time when people cannot advance. My bloodline is bad. Fair enough. But if we start comparing bloodline, I think we're all comparable, okay? But first fruit, because it's a choice, it's a demand, it starts to cleanse your bloodline. The other thing is it allows us to deal with the burdens of the past. Now, your past can be your bloodline, but not everything is bloodline. Some are your choices, some are your own mistakes. But when we do that, we move past that, and then we go into the future. So finally, first fruit allows us to be victorious in the upcoming season of kingdom clashes. So you can see it has an effect over our past, our present, and also going into the future. That's why I really want to encourage, some of you may not be regular tribe members here. That's fine. And if you just want to join us for first fruit, that's also all right, because I know not many places are celebrating first fruit. And this is something that we just felt like the Lord wants us to do here in this part. Okay, so let's look at the calendar. We are now at Iyar. Okay, Iyar, 1, here 2Y. Some people put 1Y, okay, doesn't matter. So it's like around 4 o'clock, the second month after Nisan, just right after Passover. So this is really the transition period. We are moving from Passover to Pentecost. So remember at Passover here in KL, we're still under a bit of restrictive movement. We don't want to go into a night. But now you look at Klang Valley, it's like everything business as usual, right? Almost. And now Cebu is having some restrictions. Sarawak is having some restrictions. So hopefully by Pentecost, there will be the freedom and the flexibility to meet, because it's really great when all the cities come together. Okay, let's talk about the month of Iyar, okay? So this is a month, and Iyar is always called the prophetic month because it is linked with the tribe of Issachar, the prophetic tribe. And it is an exciting month. Everyone say exciting month. So that's why I really want to encourage, during worship time, you really want to tap into the revelation. Now, you don't necessarily need to come out and pick up a mic and prophesy, but you are like getting the revelation and even prophesying to yourself. So this is the month we can expect an increase in the prophetic, what we call prophetic edge, okay? In terms of processing, in terms of receiving revelation. Now, the thing about revelation is this: we all can hear from God, right? Everyone. Jesus said, my sheep hear my voice. And we all need revelations and the mind of Christ to advance in our own area of gifting and expression. So you and I, we have different portions, we have different assignments, so we need that revelation. Yet at the same time, not everyone has a gift of prophecy. Not everyone is a prophet. This is just a reality. Not everyone is Issachar. Sometimes we talk about Issachar and people are like, oh, I'm not really Issachar. Fine, no problem. But we can still expect that increase, because we can all develop what I call the prophetic edge. And that will cause us to advance within our own area, within our own lane. You know, the thing about Christian walk is like this. You have your own lane. You know, it's like you're in a highway. You know, we have 4 lanes, 5 lanes, sometimes not a lot in Klang Valley. And you want to stay in your lane. You don't want to keep on, you know, when you see drivers who keep on changing in the highway, very, very annoying, right? It's like they don't know what they want to do. They don't know their own identity. But when you realize what you're supposed to do, you stay in your lane. You stay in your sphere. You mind your business and you fulfill the calling of God to advance the kingdom of God. Okay, so typically in Iyar, I already mentioned there is an increase of revelation. Now, regardless of your level, so even if you do not have a gift of prophecy, you are not a prophet, but I believe many here are called to be prophet. Many here are called to have the gift of prophecy. But even if that's not you, you can still expect an increase of revelation. Because one of the things is like this. Every first fruit month, you realize there is a contrast. Everyone say contrast. So it's like God's providence versus the lies of the enemy. So it's like there is this potential out there, but the enemy is always whispering something else to cause doubt. So that's why what the enemy do is always the same. There's nothing new on earth. His tricks are the same. And unfortunately, we always fall for the same trick. So he will try to cause darkness to overtake us. So one of the first things the enemy will do is create the negative atmosphere. You know, whether it's in your house or it's in your workplace, you know, just one or two words, one or two glare or look, and suddenly the atmosphere darkened. Right? I mean, husband and wife, you will know that. so that's why we're talking about courtship later, okay? And so it's very subtle, it's very simple. You don't even need to say anything and the atmosphere can darken. But an increased revelation is really God's strategy, solution, and for us to push back. And it's a choice that we have to make, that we want a different atmosphere, a different environment. So that's why coming back to the month of Iyar, Israel had to learn to do that. They were living. Did you realize that if you are in a negative atmosphere for a long time, you get used to it? You know, and sometimes you deal with people who change company, and that's really very obvious. If they're in a company that is very negative for a long time, even though they can perform the work, but they bring that kind of atmosphere into your office. So there's a thing with Israel. They were in that negative environment for 400 years. And all of a sudden, go to Mount Sinai. And when you read, that's why I always like to read Exodus and then you read Numbers and Deuteronomy. It's a bit different, you know. Because Moses, after 40 years, you know, he had additional revelation in Deuteronomy. And he'll be like, actually, it's like this, you know. I felt like that. Now I'm telling you off. We all cannot go to the promised land. It's because of your fault. So sometimes you read Deuteronomy, it's just very, very interesting because he adds some color commentary to that. And it was really what he felt because at that time he couldn't see, but now I saw that it was all your fault, okay? And so, but the original Iyar, that was the initial transition they had to make. And that's why, you know, people say, when Israel was free, God did not bring them immediately to the promised land, but brought them to Mount Sinai to give them the law, to restore them, okay, to do deliverance. So in the same way, we are coming to a place where we need to make decisions concerning this transition. So 2 questions we have to ask. Do we choose to leave the place of, the Egypt, the oppressive, the negative atmosphere place? Do we embrace the place of new covenant, Sinai? Because Sinai was a place they obtained Torah, the law, and many, many years later, Passover, the Spirit of God was poured out to the church. So that's Pentecost, okay? Now, Sinai. See, the journey from Egypt to Sinai actually was a very short one. If you walk very fast, you will reach there 3 days. If you walk very fast, okay? So they took a few months, okay? They have a few million people, so that's understandable, okay? So, but along the journey, they were confronted with a core issue. And that's why I really like the prophetic words today. It is really going back into the deliverance of the soul, asking the Lord, what is the issue that I have? Because these are the things that stop us from transitioning in this month. And the core issue is this: what relationship did they have with God? And that's a question you have to ask yourself. Do I have a relationship with God. So when I think about courtship, we're doing courtship and just, even though I was just talking to Apostle Michelle, and we're like, okay, how's our progress? What's the slight progression? These are the things we've been teaching for years and years, but to actually put it down, it requires a bit of thinking and arrangement, what to say, what not to say, and that kind of thing. And I did think back of the time where, I knew I was not having that relationship with God, even though I have academic knowledge of God. Do you know what I'm talking about? You know God, you know John 3:16, if you die, probably you go to heaven, but beyond that, there's nothing. It's just zero. So I can remember the precise moments that it happened to me, and I realized I did not have a relationship with God. So this was what was confronting Israel. They realized they didn't have a relationship with God. They heard from Aaron, they heard from Miriam, they heard from Moses, but who is God to them at a personal level? So this is one of the issues at Mount Sinai, okay? And what were their expectations? They were like, okay, we are leaving Egypt, but along the way, they complain, we don't have garlic, we don't have leek, we don't have meat. It's like, what's happening? God is trying to bring them to a new place, a better place, but they didn't have the expectation that God could be good with them. So the thing about Sinai is this, that the Lord provided Torah, right? The Lord provided Torah, and it's the Word of God, a lot of instructions, a lot of guidance, and later on in New Testament, at the same time, the outpouring of the Spirit. So what does Mount Sinai represent? It represents the foundation needed by us as the people of God to advance, because it's a Word foundation, it's a Spirit foundation. See, at Mount Sinai, if you read the story, it's very interesting. Now, even though God say, don't let the people come, they will die, remember? There's a glory of God, but at some point, Moses was saying, okay, I'm going out now. Come. And he actually extended an invitation. I was like, was he going against the order of God? No, actually, basically what he was doing is those who really wanted, they can come. Because did you realize that Joshua went halfway? Aaron and Iyar went some distance. So that means if you want, you can. So one of the things about this transition is our very core will be exposed. Our motives will be tested. Why are you doing what you are doing? Why are you saying that you are worshiping God? Those things will be exposed. And we need to be able to stand the testing of the Lord. So that this is a month of testing in some ways. So that's why at Sinai, we have two options. We either approach God like Moses, or we hide away like Israel. So two choices, and I hope we will all choose the right one. Okay, so with this, let me talk about prophetic edge, okay? Now, the prophetic edge is different from the gifts of prophecy. It is different from the office of prophecy. We can differentiate from that because it is something that is available to all, regardless of your spiritual gift. Because what it does is it allows us to access the mind of Christ. Remember, Apostle Paul said, therefore you have the mind of Christ. He's speaking to all believers, okay? Unlike Israel at those times, they needed intermediaries, right? They needed Moses, Aaron, and the priests to talk to God. Today, we can boldly come before Him, right? Hebrews 4:16. Therefore, come boldly before the throne of grace. So there's no fear there. We can talk to Him. You don't need someone to pray for you. You don't need a priest. You don't need to go to a special room or special device to communicate with God. You have that straight access. So the prophetic edge, really, when we utilize it, it is the way it functions is we have to be willing to engage and to be changed by the mind of Christ. So it's like when you have that relationship with God, the mind of Christ will come and begin to impart revelation and even instructions. And at that point, we have to make a choice. Do we want to have that? We have to be willing to receive feedback and revelations from God. Do you realize we can't resist God? I mean, we all have experience with that, right? You felt the leading of God, and then you're forget it. And later on, you just can't do it already because that moment has passed. So one of the things we want to encourage today, do not resist what the Lord is trying to do today. Do not resist what God is trying to do through you today. So many times we talk about destinies, and that's one thing when I think about Malaysia, we have sort of wasted 40 years, okay, one generation, but we are at a time where if we don't do anything, 40 years will pass. and the next generation will come. See, God can wait. He is outside time. He's not bound by the time. So that is what, we can only say what we do in our own generation and whether we have been faithful to God or not. So that's why if God is asking you to do something today, do not resist, okay? So that's why when we talk about the prophetic edge, it is essential for the advancement of a person's calling and destinies. Because we say many, many times already, unique assignments in this thing. So the other way to look at Sinai is really it's a portal to our future. And that's why when we are here and just responding to the leading of Judah, to the movement of the Holy Spirit, this is like a time of activation, if you like. Because if you are not able to be activated here to access the mind of Christ, then you will struggle to do it elsewhere, okay? So we need to learn to worship in such a way that allows the manifestations of the portal of heaven. So the whole goal is really, remember Jacob, right? Before Jacob, today so many prophetic words about Jacob, wrestling. So sort of move on from Keller to Jacob now. so now Jacob is the theme. So the thing about Jacob was, remember before the wrestling, what allows it was open heaven. Bethel, and he was seeing angels ascending and descending. I mean, you look at Old Testament Jacob, he is not a very spiritual person. He is not. He is just emo. He is an opportunist. I mean, all the words you use are not very flattering one. But nevertheless, everyone said nevertheless. He sees that one time the portal of heaven opened. And it changed his destiny. And even after that, you realize he remained a grumpy old man. But doesn't matter. God is using him to advance a nation. His destiny and legacy are set. So that's the thing. We had to do it. And even if there's one opportunity for the portal to open, that's it. But if we want to remain constantly used by God in the next 10 years, then this is what we need to do. We need to learn to access to this portal. So first fruit is one of the way, not the only way, one of the way that activates this portal. And really, we heard just now you heard from Joyce so many testimony, right? Even hair loss testimony is like that's very incredible. So there is nothing God cannot do. But if He doesn't want to do it, just accept it, okay? But if He's doing that, that means that there is that portal that helps us to advance. So that's why in Iyar, we need to have an expectation. They will be dropping off. That means God will be sending parcels of revelations and strategies. That's why this transition period is also the time where we need to develop the strategies for the future. Whatever that you plan to do, whatever is your long-term, middle-term, short-term planning, this is the time to hear the revelation and work toward that. Okay, now the other thing I want to talk about this month and link with the prophetic edge is really throwing down the gauntlet. Okay, do you know what is gauntlet? Some of you know, right? If you play games, you know. Okay, you know because you play our game. Gauntlet, okay, let me show you a photo. This is the only photo here. It's actually a glove. It's an iron glove. Gauntlet. So have you heard the expression throwing down the gauntlet? No? Okay, it's a very Western expression, okay? Okay, what does it mean? See, in the days of knighthood and chivalry, if a knight wanted to challenge another knight, so or even if you prefer the Oriental one, the wuxia kung fu one, it's the same. Some people have certain marker, and they will just drop it in your house. You see, this person wants to challenge me. Send a card like that. So, but in the Western knighthood era, whoever wants to challenge will throw down the heavy glove or what we call gauntlet. Throw it to the ground. Basically, it's to challenge. And if the challenge is accepted, you know what happens? If you are willing to fight, you go and pick out the gauntlet. And then the fight is on. So when we talk about this expression, it means issuing a challenge. And usually it's in a very dramatic way. Some people are just naturally dramatic. Naturally drama, it's like, you don't even need to teach them. They're already very drama. And it's like, the sanguines are usually like that. But this one is like you have to be very intentional. And it's like, I just drop the glove. Hopefully he will see. It doesn't work like that. it's really like, so I think of the Iyar equivalent will be you drink the wine and smash it on the floor, right? So you all look very, like, you all like, don't watch this kind of thing. Okay, never mind. So the whole point is there comes a time where we must throw down the gauntlet for ourselves and begin to issue a challenge. Challenge to what? Your surrounding problems, your surrounding obstacles. It could be natural, it could be spiritual, it could be demonic, it could be other people, it can even be yourself. Do you know that you can be a biggest hindrance to your own destiny? So that's why this prophetic edge is very important, because the sharpened prophetic edge, especially in the month of Iyar and the mind of Christ, it will allow us to do this challenge with courage and precision. You see, you need to be precise in terms of what you hear from God. You need to hear correctly. But at the same time, so often we cannot receive the prophetic word because we cannot believe it. We don't have the courage. We cannot release it. There's no bonus. Ever felt that before? You receive a word you wanted to say, but you don't dare to come out? And then the next thing, what happened? Somebody came and said the same word. Oh, missed opportunity. So the prophetic team, I know, always have this kind of story. They don't tell me, but I know, okay? But it's okay. That's why the courage is very important. And you just have to do it a few times, and don't be afraid to get wrong. We all learned. And then there will be that kind of precision in days to come. Okay, so I want to give you a few examples of throwing down the gauntlet. The first one, Jesus. Actually, after I gave 3 examples, but there's so many times in the Bible people issue a challenge to their problems. So remember at the time where it was drawing near to his crucifixion, he went to the temple, right? And he was throwing a tantrum. So people, read gospel for the first time. If you reach there, you'll be like, what's happening with this guy? Why is he throwing a tantrum? Matthew 21:12. And Jesus entered the temple and drove out all those who were buying and selling. And I was just thinking, did he physically do that? Did he slam the table? Was he behaving like a mafia or someone? And he was overturning tables of money changers and seat of those selling doves. Wrong spelling. It actually sounds like a gangster, right? Sounds like we call pai kia or whatever, You know what? You know what he was challenging? He was issuing a preliminary challenge to the religious spirit. Okay? Because remember, he has an assignment. His assignment ultimately, of course, was to defeat devil, to cause redemption, to give us the way to heaven, etc., etc. But one of his main assignment was to destroy the religious spirit. Because remember what Jesus offered. I am the way and the truth. I'm the only way to heaven, basically. So he's like, what he offered was opposite of religion. Because religion says you have to do A, B, C, S, Y, Z, then maybe you'll go to heaven. Right? So today, we're now in a fasting month. In fact, why do Muslims fast? Because that's one of the criteria to go to heaven. Do you know that? So I don't know if people miss 1 year, can they do 2 extra years to get it? I don't know. So Jesus offered the free gift of life. You cannot buy it, you cannot work toward it. We all know this. And that is opposite of religion. So that's why he went there and just kind of smashed the religious spirit as a prophetic act. Because what religious spirit does is this. It will use religion to advance its own agenda. So that's why they were doing all the things, and people come and give money, donate to the temple, but they were selling the things, because it was near Passover, you need to buy the birds, the lamb, whatever, but they were cashing in at the same time. So that is what religious spirit do. It will utilize religion to make profit for themselves. So Jesus was throwing down the gauntlet and challenged all these things because he was about to fulfill his call. Okay, let's look at another example. David. Now, David, of course. Remember, King Saul and the entire Israel were shaken by the intimidation of the giants. Actually, it's only one giant, but it's I don't know if there are others left, but the only one name. By the way, do you realize Goliath was the only one name in Canaan after the flood? The only one name. And David threw down the gauntlet against the Philistines. So before, he didn't even talk to them. He was just speaking to his own tribe. 1 Samuel 17:26. And he was very angry already. Remember, he came. He was a young boy. I think he was not even 18 yet. And the brother was scolding at him, right? Why you come? But I felt like the brothers were already very jealous because they knew that he was the predestined one, okay? So, and he was like shouting very loudly, "For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should taunt the armies of the living God?" So everyone was shaking and afraid, but he was not afraid as a youth. So you see, David entered the picture right at the tipping point. Because if Saul lost the battle, you know what? Philistine would take over the land. They will go into slavery. So it was a tipping point. So every time I think about tipping point, I just think about our own nation. We are at the tipping point. A tipping point of either we get out from the mess. So every day if you read news, it's like mess, and more mess. Then don't read the news for a while. But begin to ask God, what can I do? What gap can I step into? What is the anointing that you want to give me that will cause me to be part of the triumphant reserve to push back the darkness in this land? So that's the thing we should be asking rather than reading and forwarding all the bad news and say, very, very bad, we're all dying, we're all getting bankrupt and things like that. Don't say these kind of things. Don't defile the atmosphere. So that's why I never forward any messages because it's crap, okay? Okay, anyway, come back. So, tipping point for Israel. They needed to survive to maintain their freedom. So, David threw down the gauntlet, challenged and defeated the enemy, and he helped to usher Israel into their golden era. So, they remained free for the next 120 years. One man, one courage, one challenge set the destiny of a nation. Okay, last one. Joshua and Keller, we still have to come back to this. Yeah, there's a theme for the last few months, okay? Numbers 14, 6-9. And this was after they came back at Kadesh Berea, and everyone is like, don't go. And they were like, no, do not rebel against the Lord. Do not fear the people of the land. Do not fear the giants, because the Lord has said we will have victory. You know, why are you doing this? You know, Joshua and Caleb, basically, they presented a minority report, 2 out of 12, and challenged the false reports. Now, one of the things about the 12 is we usually call them spies, right? But you realize that they are not just spies, they were elders, okay? These are high-ranking people. Most likely, it's like the tribe leader, second or third in command, the younger generation. So these are the royalty of Israel society. It's not just some servant or some special force go and climb the mountain and things like that and come back. No, these are the next generation rulers. So when the rulers gave a false report, that's the worst thing that can happen. That's why it's the same in the ecclesia. When the leaders gave a false report concerning the testimonies of God, that is the end. That is the end, and God will move on. So that's why what they did, they threw down the gauntlet. And very interesting, I see them functioning as intercessors because they are stepping in the gap and say, no. And you know what God did? God honored their courage and preserved the two of them for future war campaign. Because what they did, they challenged, they rebuked the fear, the faithlessness, and it was a disappearing courage. Because when you read the whole progression, you know, the way to sum out some of the Israelites at that time is really hot and cold. Sometimes hot, sometimes cold. So unfortunately, at that point, they were cold. They got cold-feeted. And so he was challenging. So this allowed the Lord to form a triumphant reserve in future, which one day, 40 years later, God will use them again. So like Keller said, I'm all ready, but my knees are still strong. I still have the energy. I want to have the land that Moses promised me. So that's why God honored that, because they threw a challenge, even though they couldn't change the majority report. They couldn't. But at least they gave themselves that portion. So that's why this is a month we have to let the gauntlets be thrown down, whatever it is. So we look at the three of them. Jesus challenged the religious spirit. He steps into his destiny, and then that destiny allows him to give life to all, salvation for all. David challenged the giants of the land, save his nation, usher in a golden era. Joshua and Caleb challenged the faithless tribe, the faithless elders. See, this one is like within your own tribe, you know. So sometimes do not be afraid if you get stabbed by people in your tribe. I'm not saying it will happen. I'm saying do not be surprised. And then God used them as a triumphant reserve in the next generation. Okay, so lesson for us. Today is very fast, okay? So we need to understand times and season. You see, times are changing, and what if you watch Lord of the Rings, the whole long trilogy, it's like one of the things I always like is, the elf are the prophetic people, okay? So they are like, especially Galadriel. Galadriel is the most prophetic one in the whole show and book also. And she always say, I can feel the times and seasons are changing. She literally say that. I cannot do the clap bank chat impression, but you know what I mean. It's like really the prophetic people do that. They can feel what is changing, but then for us individually, we have to make a choice. There comes a time we have to be on the offensive. You cannot tolerate the things surrounding you anymore. And you cannot be passive. I'm not saying you become a bulldog all the time. Some people are like, just chong and scold people all the time, angry all the time. I'm not asking you to do that. Now, I know some of you are more choleric, you're very direct, but you don't want to do that all the time. But there comes a time, choose offense, not defense. So we are now seeing unprecedented change in the world. I mean, all around us, the last 12, 18 months, huge change, right? But also within the ecclesia, the tribe formation is changing. We are still seeing some churches have not been meeting for the last 1 year. It's just amazing. I don't know how they can get back. But God is changing all these things. So you see, that's the thing I mentioned earlier. God's kingdom will continue to advance regardless of our participation. I think some people get a bit shocked over that. But why should you be shocked? God say, I am the Alpha and Omega. I have seen the end. So whatever our interaction with God, He saw it from the perspective of what is the end. But He is always giving us revelation and guidance so that we sort of stay in the course, stay in the lane to fulfill our ultimate destiny. Of course, we can deviate from there. We make mistakes, but God is always trying to cause us to come back. And that's the whole thing when He was talking to Cain. If you do what is right, and He already saw what Cain will do, but nevertheless, he has to try because he will not override the free will. So, God's kingdom will advance. If we don't want to be part of it, it may be delayed for a while, but ultimately it gets done. So, when I was just doing this part of the slide, I just reminded January, when after the US election, Chuck Pierce was talking to Sid Roth, in Supernatural, today, the show. And, Sid was just very disturbed over the whole thing because he was very concerned about the relationship with Israel. Just someone prophesied about that. That's a concern for us in Malaysia. We cut off from that covenant and it can become a curse to us as a nation. So Sid was very concerned and say, with Biden coming out, we're going to have bad relationship with Israel. And so that's what Chuck was trying to say, look, this is what is going to happen. God's will happen regardless. And they were just having a very interesting conversation, and eventually he was just prodding Chuck, come on, as a prophet, give us a concluding remark. And Chuck said, we win. We win, we will win. But the timing is another issue. So for Malaysia, I believe we win. But is it going to be in this generation? Is it going to be the next generation? It's up to you and me. I don't want to waste another 40 years, honestly, because we have seen the destruction, and even though ultimately it can become a sheep nation, but we want to cooperate with God. See, we need to stand out against the voices and actions of tyrannies and injustices, okay? Now, remember, we have been authorized to engage in certain battles. God will authorize you. You can fight this. This is your fight. That's why the revelation is so important. You have to pick the right fight. You cannot fight everything. If you fight everything, you get wounded. You don't want to be busybody, but when it is your fight, we cannot shy away from it. So let's quickly look at the authority and then we'll end, okay? So there is the authority to threat. Luke 10:19. This was the first time Jesus sent out, all the disciples, all the apostles. So in Luke 10, it's 2 by 2, right? And He said, behold, I have given you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions, and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing will injure you. So when we look at the Greek word threat, it literally means to trample, to crush. But from the Thayer's dictionary, Thayer's is a reference book a lot of scholars use, okay? Very interesting how he described it. to encounter successfully the greatest perils from the persecutions of Satan. So what it means is when you are threading, when you're trying to fight spiritual forces of the enemy, it is a dangerous thing. So do not take spiritual warfare lightly. But at the same time, Jesus said, I have given you authority. You will win. That's why the question to ask, what is the limit to this authority? I have given you over all the power of the enemy on earth. So people are always talking about, the territorial spirit, they are actually technically not on earth, they are in second heaven, you have no authority. We have to work on revelation, on what God has spoken to us. If He said, go and fight, what do? We go and fight, right? So that's why this is the month, again, coming back to the focus of Iyar. Sharpen our prophetic edge so that we can receive the right revelation, so that we can throw down the gauntlet. So you may not have the metal glove, okay? Just throw whatever glove. So what is the Lord asking you to challenge today? So I just want to finish off with this part and showing you some of the issues that you and me, we may need to fight against. So the first thing I already mentioned, negative atmosphere. And this is the thing that I see the most common the last 1 year. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of intimidation, that so many believers are so easily shaped by the news cycle. It's like their emotion go up and down depending on the news, depending on what's happening. So cannot be like that, because we are not like this. We are not someone that is like in a wave, sometimes up, sometimes down. We have to be steady. We cannot be double-minded, remember? Then the second thing is we have to deal with false reports, accusations, and lies. So that's what Joshua and Keller had to do, right? They presented a minority report, but it was not enough. The judgment of God came already. But nevertheless, when we are confronted with this, you have to throw down the gauntlet and say, I don't accept that. And that's one of the things I feel like, by the way, do you know you can do this respectfully? You don't have to scream and shout or roll on the floor. You can be like, I don't accept what you say. And it can be very gentle, but it has a spiritual penetration into the atmosphere. I don't accept, because this is a lie. This is an accusation. Then we have the issue of blockages. There's the issue of lack. People complain, no time, no energy, no money, no nothing, and no supplies. And sometimes blockages are due to sabotage. Sabotage by your own family, by your own friends, or even yourself. There could be a self-imposed limitation, lack of discipline, lack of passion. So at the end, we have to ask ourselves, did we contribute to all these things? And how are we going to throw down the gauntlet to challenge, okay? So Lord, I just pray today as we celebrate into this first fruit, Lord, you gave us the strategies and revelations and the mind of Christ today that will cause us to challenge the negative atmospheres, the false reports, the blockages, and any self-imposed limitation. Lord, I say that we will go to Sinai this month and we will receive the revelation and instructions that will empower us for this season ahead. Amen.